Hello, you're watching Movie Snapshot Scenes, and this is the summary of Hereditary. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel. The Graham family lived in a secluded, two-story home surrounded by dense woods, a place that seemed to breathe with quiet unease. Annie, a miniature artist, spent her days crafting intricate dioramas, each scene more unsettling than the last. Her husband, Steve, a pragmatic man, balanced her intensity with calm logic. Their two children, Peter and Charlie, moved through the house like ghosts, disconnected from each other and the world. But it was Charlie who worried Annie the most. The 13-year-old girl was peculiar, pale, withdrawn, with a habit of clicking her tongue and cutting the heads off dead birds. She sketched disturbing figures in her notebook and stared into corners where nothing stood. Annie blamed herself. She'd been emotionally distant during Charlie's infancy, and now the girl seemed to exist in another realm entirely. Then came the funeral. Annie's mother, Ellen, a secretive and domineering woman, passed away, leaving behind a trail of cryptic notes and an attic full of occult relics. At the burial, strangers lingered too long, their eyes fixed on Charlie. That night, Annie woke to find Charlie standing in the dark, whispering to someone unseen. "Who are you talking to?" Annie asked. Charlie turned, her face blank. "Grandma." Next morning, Peter begged to go to a high school party. Reluctantly, Annie agreed, but only if he took Charlie with him. At the party, Charlie, overwhelmed by noise and strangers, ate a slice of chocolate cake laced with nuts. Her throat swelled shut. Panicked, Peter sped her to the hospital. But on the winding road, Charlie stuck her head out the window for air. A telephone pole loomed. The car jerked. A sickening crunch. Peter didn't look back. He drove home in silence, Charlie's headless body still buckled in the seat beside him, and in the back seat, something clicked its tongue. Peter arrived home in a daze, his hands still gripping the steering wheel. He didn't scream, didn't cry. He simply walked inside, covered in his sister's blood, and collapsed on his bed. When Annie found Charlie's body in the car, the next morning her wails tore through the house, a sound so raw it seemed to shake the walls. The funeral was a blur. Charlie's head, recovered from the roadside, was grotesquely stitched to her body for the viewing. Annie's grief twisted into something manic. She began sleepwalking, waking up in Charlie's room, her fingers stained with paint. One night, Steve found her in the attic, frantically flipping through Ellen's old books, whispering about secrets in the pages. "She's trying to communicate," Annie insisted. "Charlie and my mother, they're both here." Steve dismissed it as trauma until the nightmares started. Peter dreamt of his sister's headless corpse chasing him through the halls, her tiny hands clutching a pair of sewing scissors. He'd wake up gasping, only to hear faint clicks in the darkness, Charlie's sound. Then, Annie met Joan. A sympathetic woman from her grief support group, Joan approached Annie after a session. "I can help you reach her," she murmured, pressing a note into Annie's palm, an address for a séance. Desperate, Annie went. The ritual began innocently enough. Candles, chanting, hands joined in a circle. But when Joan's voice shifted, guttural, inhuman, the table trembled. A gust of wind blew out the candles, and in the blackness, Annie felt something lick her ear. "Mommy." Charlie's voice echoed, but it wasn't just hers. Something deeper, bolder, slithered beneath it. Annie fled, but the voice followed. That night, Peter awoke to his mother standing over his bed, her eyes wide and unblinking. "I need you to help me," she whispered. "She's in the attic." Above them, the ceiling creaked, as if something heavy were dragging itself across the floor. The attic door stood slightly ajar, a sliver of darkness beckoning. Annie climbed the stairs with Peter close behind, his breath ragged with fear. The air grew thicker with each step, smelling of burnt hair and wet earth. Inside, they found Ellen's old belongings scattered, yellowed photographs of strangers, jars filled with blackened herbs, and a leather-bound book with Paimon etched into its cover. Annie's hands trembled as she flipped through its pages, revealing grotesque illustrations, decapitated heads, inverted crosses, and a crowned figure seated on a throne of bones. "This isn't just grief, Steve," Annie whispered, her voice cracking. She was in a cult. They wanted Charlie. No, not Charlie. Something else. That night, Peter woke to the sound of faint knocking. His bedroom walls pulsed like living flesh. Shadows pooled in the corners, forming a gaunt figure. Tall, its limbs too long, its face hidden in the dark. It raised a single finger to where lips should have been. "Shh," Peter screamed. Steve burst in, flicking on the light, but the room was empty. "You're both losing it," Steve snapped, though his own hands shook. He grabbed the occult book and hurled it into the fireplace. The flames turned an unnatural blue as the pages curled, and a chorus of distant screams filled the house. Annie's sleepwalking worsened. Steve found her in Charlie's room one night, hovering above the bed, her body contorted at impossible angles. Her head lolled back, her voice not her own. "I never wanted to be your mother." The next morning, Annie discovered fresh sketches in Charlie's notebook, crude, frantic drawings of Peter with his eyes gouged out. Beneath them, a single phrase in a child's handwriting: "Paimon needs a new home." Outside, the family dog howled. When Peter went to check, he found it dead. Its neck snapped, its paws arranged in a perfect circle. And perched on its chest was Charlie's tiny, severed head, her lips sewn shut with black thread. Annie stopped sleeping. She paced the house at night, her movements jerky and unnatural, muttering in languages she'd never learned. Steve begged her to see a doctor, but she'd just smile, a stretched, hollow grin, and whisper, "You let her die too." Peter found her in the backyard one morning, naked and covered in mud, arranging sticks into strange symbols. When he tried to pull her inside, she turned with inhuman speed, her voice layered with something ancient. "You will bring the crown." That night, Steve confronted Annie in the living room. The argument turned violent. Annie's fingers clawed at his face, her strength unnatural. A lamp shattered. Then, with a sickening crack, Annie's body levitated mid-air, her spine arching backward like a broken doll as an invisible force snapped her neck. Peter watched in frozen horror as his mother's corpse floated to the ceiling, then soared off her own head with a length of piano wire. The house fell silent. Then, movement. Annie's headless body rose, fingers twitching. It picked up the severed head by its hair and placed it gently on a miniature throne in her studio, surrounded by her dioramas. The head's dead lips parted. "Hail Paimon." Peter fled upstairs, but the bathroom mirror showed a figure behind him, the gaunt shadow from his dreams, now wearing Charlie's smile. It reached through the glass and seized his throat. When Peter awoke, he was kneeling in the attic, surrounded by robed figures he'd never seen before. Joan stood at their center, pressing a gilded crown into his hair. "The king needs eyes," she crooned. Peter tried to scream, but his mouth was already sewn shut. Peter's body no longer felt like his own. The attic pulsed with candlelight as the cultists chanted in low, guttural tones. Joan pressed the crown harder onto his skull. The metal burned like ice, searing his thoughts into fragments. His vision doubled. One moment he saw the robed figures, the next he saw through them, their rotting souls, their hollow devotion. "Paimon accepts your suffering," Joan whispered, dragging a knife across Peter's palm. Blood dripped onto an ancient sigil, carved into the floorboards. The house groaned in response. Then, movement. Annie's headless corpse lurched into the circle, holding her own severed head like an offering. The cultists bowed as the head's dead lips parted. "My son is ready." Peter's spine arched violently, his jaw unhinged with a wet crack, and something thick and black poured from his mouth. Not blood, but smoke, swirling into the shape of a horned figure. The cultists wept with joy. "All hail the king," Joan sobbed. Peter's consciousness shattered. He, was floating now, a prisoner behind his own eyes. As Paimon stretched his limbs like a newborn colt, the cultists removed the stitches from his mouth, not to free him, but to hear their king speak. The first words from Peter's throat were not his own. "Where is my sister?" The attic door burst open. Charlie's decapitated body crawled inside, her tiny hands clutching the scissors that had killed the dog. The cultists parted as she placed her own severed head at Paimon's feet, a final sacrifice. Peter screamed internally as Paimon lifted Charlie's head. The lips peeled back, not in a smile, but in a silent wail as the crown was placed upon it. "A worthy vessel," Paimon mused through Peter's voice. "But a king needs a queen." Outside, 3 pairs of glowing eyes blinked open in the darkness. Dawn should have brought light, but the Graham house remained swallowed in unnatural darkness. Peter's body, no, Paimon's body, stood before the cult, his once human eyes now black and depthless. The air smelled of copper and burnt flesh. Joan knelt, pressing her forehead to the floor. "The ritual is complete," she whispered. But Paimon tilted Peter's head, studying the cult with cold amusement. "You misunderstand," the demon crooned. "A king does not serve his subjects." One by one, the cultists began to choke. Their hands flew to their throats as invisible forces lifted them into the air, legs kicking, faces purpling. Bones snapped like dry twigs. Joan's eyes bulged as her tongue turned black and slithered from her mouth like a dying eel. Outside, Annie's headless corpse staggered to the family's miniature-filled studio. Her fingers, stiff with rigor mortis, began crafting one final diorama, a perfect replica of the attic, complete with tiny bloodied corpses and a crowned figure on a throne of human teeth. In the real attic, Paimon stepped over the dead cultists, toward Charlie's reanimated body. Her decapitated head now sat perfectly on her shoulders, her milky eyes reflecting nothing. "Sister," Paimon murmured through Peter's ruined throat. Charlie smiled. Together, they walked downstairs, where Steve's mangled body hung from the ceiling like a grotesque chandelier, his face frozen in a scream. The front door creaked open. 3 figures waited in the driveway. Neighbors, their eyes glassy, their mouths sewn into smiles. New vessels, new worshippers. As Paimon crossed the threshold, Peter's consciousness made one final, desperate push. A single human thought, piercing the darkness. "Mom?" Then nothing. The house stood silent. In the attic, the miniature of the Graham family trembled. Then Annie's tiny clay hand reached out and turned off the light.